Good evening, councillors. The first item of business is the nomination, is the confirmation of Councillor Carol Coburn as Chairman of Southern Area Planning Committee. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you.
We'll do it within the dark, don't we? Oh, we've got it right. Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this first meeting of the new mayoral year. Please, can you make sure you know the fire regulations, which are as usual on the screen behind, and that your phones are switched off or to silent. And can I remind you, if you have a card, to speak directly into the microphone and make sure that you are heard. There are no members of the public, so I won't bother addressing them at the moment. So we can move straight on to the items of business. We've done the chairman and vice chairman, so the minutes, are you content that I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of March 2017? I'll do that at the end of the meeting. Apologies for absence, Emma.
We have, sorry, I've got no apologies for absence. Thank you.
Very brief. Right. Moving on then to disclosure of interest. Have these changed from the last group of people, or can we take them the set interest that if you're a member of the Town Council Planning Committee? Is there any change to that, basically, is what I'm trying to say? Right. Does anyone have any other interest other than that one? Questions by members of the public, Emma? Do we have any?
No,
Which brings us to the relevant updates to government guidance. I'm sure there's oodles from Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have two matters to update the committee on. The first relates to the Neighbourhood Planning Act. Members that were previously on the committee will recall that I provided an update on the Neighbourhood Planning Bill when that was published. This has now received royal assent and now comprises the Neighbourhood Planning Act 2017. The first part of the Act largely deals with processing of neighbourhood plans. However, there are two sections which directly impact upon development control and decision making. Section 14 is the first point I'm just going to turn to. This will introduce, or the proposed is to introduce, restrictions on the imposition of planning conditions, which will pre-commencement planning conditions, which will require agreement from the applicant prior to the council applying any pre-commencement conditions to a decision. A commencement order is awaited for this to take effect, but it's likely this will now be after the general election. But it's just important to take into account that if we're at a committee, we're sitting here and we feel we want to add an additional pre-commencement condition, we need to take account of that requires the applicant's agreement. So what I would ask, if you're minded to apply something like that or think it might be appropriate prior to a committee, highlight it with officers and we can seek that advice to take it forward, or we can look for some slightly alternative wording that's not pre-commencement but it's appropriately worded to deal with what you may need. I think that's quite the most important update coming out of that. Section 15 is also relevant, which requires an amendment to the General Permitted Development Order. And what this is seeking is, as soon as reasonably practical, after coming into force, to restrict permitted development rights currently applying to pubs, wine bars, drinking establishments, effectively, but only in the event they fall into Class A, Use Class A4, which is drinking establishments. It's important to note that a number of drinking establishments actually fall under Use Class A3 rather than A4, and that's due to service of food being a significant part. So if it's got a restaurant and a pub with it, it falls under an A3. So the use, the permitted development allowances to change of use for those type premises will still apply. You hopefully be pleased to be aware that there's the general permitted development order has already been changed, so we don't have to wait to ask the general election. So the restrictions on changes of use for classes A4 come into force on the 23rd of May this year. There's a number, as I say, there's a number of other provisions in that, but I won't take you through all of those today. The EIA regulations have also been updated. So regulations for environmental impact assessment have been revised under the Town and Country Planning Regulations 2017. They come into effect on the 16th of May this year. The main difference introduced under these regulations are validation requirements for screening opinions when they're received for potentially EIA development, more flexibility during that screening to take mitigation into account before finding out whether a form of development is EIA development. The set out scope of the scoping opinion, so that's when we've decided it's EIA development, what needs to be involved is now compulsory as well. And there's also reference in there to preparation of both screening opinions and requests for scoping opinions must be completed by a competent person. There's no guidance of what a competent person is or what they should be, but we will need to be satisfied that they've got appropriate qualification to give advice on the specific matter relating to that. There's also, in addition to the monitoring of the conditions relating to EIA development, and that's a new point as well. So there's now 4 stages. You have the screening stage to decide whether it's EIA development. If we determine it is EIA development, you then have a scoping stage, which sets out what the environmental impact assessment needs to consider. There's also the handling of the environmental statement, and there's a formal process which has to go through, which we will update our process and follow through. And then the additional point is the updating need to monitor conditions. We're putting into practice that legislation, working through. It is long and quite lengthy, so I don't intend you to take it through, but I'm happy to take questions on that or separately outside of the committee to share that specific regulations with you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. We made a decision some time back that when you have a lot of information like this, you would send us something written afterwards, because there's a lot there and a lot of changes. So if anybody has any questions now, but I think most of us probably need more information and time outside the meeting. But thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll share it around, and as I say, it's quite a detailed bit of legislation, so just headlines. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was very remiss, I didn't introduce the officers, because there are, or certainly one new face around here. Peter Cleveland, who you all know, the head of DC. Louise, I hope by now you all know Louise Yandel. Chris Turner, who's been with us for some time now, planning officer. And on the other side of the table, as it were, we've got a totally new face there. Lewis Jones is joined in the legal department, and he's going to take over from Dan, who is moving across to Pastors New, but we're not losing him entirely. So welcome, Lewis, to your first Southern planning meeting, and we hope you enjoy it and look forward to hearing your advice as we go through later on. I don't think we need too much tonight, but we'll see. Right, so moving on then to the applications for planning permission. In the event of any site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of tonight's meeting, again, I think this is highly unlikely, but they will be held on the 6th of June at a time to be agreed. So straight on then to item B1, WA 2017-0491, erection of a single-storey extension following demolition of existing garage lobby, 25 Ashcombe, Chiddingfold. And Chris, please, would you like to introduce this?
Sorry, I'm just having a few IT problems.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. 25 Ashcombe, Chiddingfold. The site's located on the eastern side of Ashcombe. Ashcombe is a residential close which gently rises towards the southeast. 25 Ashcombe is a 2-storey brick-built property with attached garage and conservatory to the rear. The existing house can be seen on these photographs. Photograph 1 in the top left shows the front of the dwelling from Ashcombe. Photograph 2 in the middle left shows the existing garage when viewed from the end of the driveway. Photograph 3 on the bottom left shows the existing relationship with the adjacent neighbouring property at number 2 Oak Close. Photograph 4 on the top right shows the rear of the existing dwelling. The proposed garage will be visible on the right hand side of this photograph. Photograph 5 on the middle right shows the existing link to the existing garage. The neighbour at number 2 Oak Close is visible beyond this. Photograph 6 on the bottom right shows the existing flat roof garage from the garden when looking towards the southwest at Ashcombe. The proposal includes the demolition of an existing garage. The existing garage will be replaced by the proposed single-storey side extension. The proposed extension would extend forward of the front elevation of the host dwelling by 0.8 metres and extend beyond the rear elevation of the host dwelling by 2.4 metres. The proposed side extension would measure 3.1 metres in width and would have a total depth of 10.7 metres. The proposed extension would have a hipped roof which would have a ridge height of 3.8 and 4.5 metres. It would have an eave height of 2.5 metres. The garage wall adjacent to the boundary with number 2 Oak Club would be reduced in height and would remain as a boundary wall, which would measure 1.8 metres. The extension would be used as a garage, utility and kitchen. In conclusion, officers consider that the extensions would appear acceptable and there would be no harmful impacts on the amenities of the adjoining occupiers. The matters of principal or technical opinion are the principle of development, access and parking, biodiversity and the effect on the SPAs. The matters of judgment are the impact on the greenbelt, impact on visual amenity and landscape character, impact on the character of the AOMB and AGLV and the impact on residential amenity. I draw members' attention to the update sheet which shows an additional drawing. As such, an update to condition 1 is shown on the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want to turn your mic off? That's great, thanks. Yes, members, it's over to you, Councillor Inchbald.
Thank you, Chairman. This is within my ward. It's, I think, a completely non-controversial application. I don't think I've ever seen an officer's recommendation accompanied by only 2 conditions, one of which is absolutely standard, and I would therefore propose that we move straight to the vote.
And do you have a seconder for that proposal? Is that agreed? Agreed. Sorry, in that case, let's move straight to the recommendation. The recommendation to grant. The recommendation is that permission be granted subject to amended condition 1 in the update and condition 2, informatives 1 and 2 on the agenda report. May I see all those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
That's unanimous.
And that, I think, concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, members.